Today we're going to be working on a 2007 Chevy Cobalt. It's got a fuel leak. You can smell gas outside the vehicle and inside the vehicle. So we first look around up front here, around fuel injectors and the fuel rail. It's underneath here, along this rail and the fuel lines, and I don't see any leaks. So we're going to go underneath the car and show you what we found. All right, we're underneath the car here, and as your fuel lines come down, they kind of hug the body right here. And a very common spot for them to have an issue is going to be towards the back where they go into some of this heat shroud material. And a lot of times there's heavy corrosion inside of that, holds moisture. You can even see up in here there's rust against the body, rust on the lines. But I don't see any moisture around this, so that's not the leak in this particular case. This leak is coming from the top of the gas tank. So we're going to have to pull this tank out, and most likely it's going to be the fuel pump seal or the line coming out the fuel pump. This is the front of the tank. You can see the oily gasoline residue all over the bottom of the shield and coming from up inside of there on the tank itself. So before you start taking things loose, like lines off the fuel filter, lines that come to the evap canister and all that hose the neck to fill the tank. You want to go remove the fuel pump relay and run the car until it runs out of fuel, so you depressurize the system. And while you're there, you can check and see how much fuel is in the tank. If you don't have a method to hold the tank when it's got some weight to it, like a transmission jack or something like that, then you probably want to siphon the fuel out before you take it all loose, so that you can just have a lightweight tank. But if you've got a transmission jack, which I do, is probably how I'm going to lower the tank out of here. Under the hood, you're going to find the fuse box right here. Gotta kind of move a couple things out of the way here. Flip it over and you look for the fuel pump. It's right here. 15 amp fuse and the relay. So you can take them both out or just one, doesn't matter. Looks like it's going to be these two right here. Just going to turn the key on and check the fuel level. This car is pretty much full. All right, next, I'm gonna start the car. Pull that fuel pump fuse. Let it run out of fuel. Now your system should be depressurized. Go ahead and get inside the trunk and disconnect the battery. So you can start tracing the lines that come directly off the tank. These here, these two that go to the fuel filter, that electrical plug on the right side, this one here, that wiring goes to the fuel tank. The other plugs come to these other wires and go to your vapor canister, emergency brake, stuff like that. So you just want to disconnect the lines that are attached to the fuel tank. So this vapor canister or purge canister, charcoal canister, it's got a lot of names. That hose needs to come off, so depress the clips on the side, pull straight back. This one here goes up and that goes into the engine compartment to probably a solenoid. That one doesn't need to be unplugged. You can move to the fuel lines. Probably gonna get some dripping here. Even though we ran the car, there could still be residual fuel left in this filter. So make sure you got a pan underneath or something to absorb the fuel. As I said, this electrical connector here, take that one loose. Oh, and it looks like it's wired in with the other one. So we'll take that loose. See, those are connected to the same harness. And I'm probably gonna get a screwdriver to hold one side of these while I push on the other. We'll do the fuel filter lines next. What I ended up doing to get that first line was taking a pair of hose pliers and gripping them around the connector so that those pieces of the plier could hook inside. Sorry, bad camera. Those pieces of the plier could hook inside that clip, depressed them, and then got in here with a trim tool and pried the fitting back. This hose is in the way, you can't see very well, but that got the first one off. Once the first one's off, then you have a little bit more room to get up and around the next one. It's a little tight at first. So you squeeze on these tabs on the fitting. See how I got the pliers there? And then if it can't pull off, then I use the trim tool to slide in here and push it off. Trying to hold the phone and not get gasoline on myself here. So you just pry away with that trim tool. It's going to be the same process for this small one here. Just put your pliers in there. Don't have to be this kind of pliers, you can use anything. As long as you depress those tabs and push the line off. Next we'll want to take loose the filler neck. And you have a choice. There's two different clamps here. One's right at the tank, one's a little further up. I'm going a little further up because our tank is full and I need all the help I can get to not spill gas everywhere. So you can slide the clamp up onto the steel hose if you want, and then use one of these hose tools or screwdriver. Get in here and break loose that bond. And we're gonna have some fuel coming out, so I'm gonna get a bucket. We've got a jack placed underneath here. There's like a shield. You're gonna have to remove a couple of clips on here, the plastic clips. Another one on this side. And then the straps, the bolts are up here above. There's one behind that fuel filter. So, other side, straps are easily accessible. There and there. Look like 13 millimeters. Start with the push clips. You can just pull the center up on them. And then you should be able to remove the whole body. Got some exhaust hangers here. You want to just give those a little bit of WD-40 or some lubricant so that you can slip those rubbers off. There's a couple here in the back. And one more right here. And you can use, pry bar, screwdriver, or get your hand up in there, try to wiggle them off the end. With that lubrication just helps them out. Once you get all those hangers loose, you just let the exhaust hang down and rest right here on that rear support. Gives you just a little bit more room between the exhaust and the fuel tank so that you can lower and kind of scoot it out sideways. All right, now we're ready to take the strap bolts loose. I showed you all 4 of those. These have direct tension on them from the fuel tank, so once you start to loosen them, you're going to see the tank lower. Just go around to all 4, make sure you got your jack underneath so it can't go anywhere. All right, you can see the tank starting to come down. It's below the edge of the car now. See it hanging down a little bit. Remove the straps once your 4 bolts are out. And then you're gonna watch the lines and make sure nothing's hanging up. So these are probably just laying in the top of the tank there, but we're gonna have to, this is stuck and I didn't want to pour fuel everywhere, so now that it's leaning forward just a little bit, I might try to pull this line off, but it's gonna be definitely both of my hands are gonna be busy trying to lower the jack with the handle there. Make sure that nothing's binding up and it's got a clean exit out here. There's no lines getting hung up that'll break. And then at the same time, I'm gonna be trying to pry this hose off. So I'm gonna not get this part on camera, but if your fuel tank is not full, like mine is, this is a much easier process. You can just go ahead and push this hose off at any time. And then you're just worried about lowering the tank. But since I've got a full fuel tank and nothing to siphon it into besides a 5-gallon bucket, which will get me a little bit, but I still have a pretty significant amount of fuel in there, so I'm just gonna go with it. And what a spill, I spill. All right, we got a little bit of progress here. So got the neck hose off. Just put a pair of vice grips on there to attempt to close that hose, try not to get any spillage. I went ahead and pushed up these lines off the tank. They have like a little channel that they run in, but I wanted this flexibility because we're gonna have to kind of maneuver this tank at an angle, down and out and then forward at the same time to get that neck past this brace here. As you can see, we're pretty much touching the exhaust on this side, so it can't really come down anymore over there. It's gotta go to the right, this direction, which we're almost clear on the front there. So go slightly down, slightly forward, and then slightly to the right. That's the direction we're gonna be pushing while watching these plastic lines because they're brittle and can easily break. This one we're not real worried about because it's rubber. Okay, essentially we've got it lowered, but we still have those evaporator lines running up here. So we've got to take the tank towards the front of the car so that we can get these lines the rest of the way forward and off of that frame there. All right, you have the option to pull out of these plastic clips and take this connector loose from the, actually both these connectors because they're in the same harness, from the canister, but I'm actually, there's one last harness here attached and I'm gonna just unplug it from the fuel pump and it'll be completely free. Tank is out. You can see, you know, the same thing we saw from underneath where the moisture and residue starts on the side here, right about there. It tracks all the way to the top. You can tell, you know, this is the dry, dusty. There's the moisture right in that track. Same thing over here, very dry. Moisture you can see is kind of coming this direction. Well, if you look up underneath the car, you can see the stain is on the top side, right there, and then spraying or dripping down the front side. So something on top is spraying up. You know, when the system becomes pressurized, that line right there is all clean. So I would presume that that line is spraying in the up direction, and then it has a chance to drip right here and down, over there and down, and even down the front side where there's no dust or there's no wetness right here, but you can see it travels down the front of the tank in 2 spots and gets down here. Then the wind blows it around and gets everywhere, but that is extremely clean right on that back fitting right there. So we're going to replace the fuel pump. We are going to clean the top of the tank with some brake clean. That way no dirt gets in the fuel tank. Then we're going to just use a block of wood against this, and we got to drive this lock ring in a counterclockwise direction in order to pull this assembly out. And then one other thing I'm going to do, take this clamp off, and we're going to siphon some of the fuel into the bucket just so there's not any sloshing when I put it back in. it'll be a little simpler. Like I said, we're just going to line a block of wood up there, tap it on the end with a small hammer. You can't do this with holding the camera, so I'll show you afterwards. Once you get the locking ring loose, you can pull the assembly up out of the tank, remove the old O-ring. Got a new one here. The fuel pump has the lines on it, so does the new one. And it was a little difficult to get up out of there. This hose here was blocking it from being pulled out. Whenever you insert the new unit, you got to start with the float level. Put that in first. Then lower the rest down in. You're going to have to compress these lines on the side just a little bit to get that to fall in. And you want to line it up so that these hard lines press down into the grooves on the tank. Once you got the orientation where you need it, then this is spring loaded. So you're going to have to use both hands. One to press it down, and then one to lock the ring into place. Once you get it pressed down and started just barely under the tab so it's held, then you're going to have to do the opposite process here and tap it into place to close it with a punch or a block of wood, something. So you're going to tap this clockwise so it locks all the way into place underneath those tabs. Once you get your lock ring all the way seated, you can see that it's up against the stop there. You're going to put your lines back in the track here, and then we're ready to go back up with the tank. This is just going to be the reverse process of removal. So you're going to weave these lines back in there, wiggle that tank up into place, use your jack to press it up. With the tank back in, I'm going to reattach your filler neck, your lines to your canister, your feedback, your electrical plugs, the fuel lines to the fuel filter, tighten up your straps. Then we're going to want to put the exhaust back on the hangers and go back to the fuse box and plug back in our 15 amp fuse for the fuel pump relay. Come back to the fuse box. Plug that 15 back in, make sure it's seated. Get back in the trunk and reconnect your battery. That's it for today's video on how to change the fuel pump out in a Chevy Cobalt, probably from what, 06, 05 up to 2010. So thanks for watching. If you like the video, please subscribe.